Our last image is from the Kuba people, large area here in the center of Central Africa. And for this civilization is number 171. The title is Ndop of King Mishi. It's from 1700 CE, and we're in the current day Democratic Republic of the Congo. We're looking at a wooden sculpture, and just like a lot of our African art, we have both an image of the artwork itself and a contextual image. Again, it's important to understand both images and to be able to discuss what's happening in the contextual photos and kind of identify some of that contextual information. So please be sure that you become familiar with both. This Ndop figure, it's basically, they are portrait figures of the different Kuba rulers. The Kuba rulers presented in kind of an ideal state, so that has a lot to do with the facial expression that you'll see on the Ndop figures. They're very, very kind of at peace. They seem uninvolved and unbothered by mortal affairs. It's, even though it's a portrait sculpture, it's never like an exact replica of the Kuba leader. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's basically a representation of his spirit, and they're made after the death of a king. So it's not something that's commissioned or created during their lifetime. Each king is commemorated by symbols that are located on the base of the Ndop figure, which is why we have a close-up down here of some of that symbolism and those objects. Some of the objects on this specific one, we have a sword that's placed in his left hand, but the important thing to make note about the sword, here's the handle, is that it is a non-aggressive pose, that, you know, the handle's facing outward, so it's not like it's raised in any sort of like call to action or anything like that. And then this sculpture, this tradition, these Ndop figures are one of the earliest, this specific Ndop figure, I'm sorry, is one of the earliest existing African wood sculptures. It's definitely the oldest Ndop in existence that we're aware of. Also, just kind of like those mask that we saw of the Mende, it's also rubbed with a pretty thick like palm oil. You know, these porous wooden sculptures are coated with this palm oil, which gives it its really lovely sheen, but more so what it has done is protected the wood from any sort of decay or any sort of like, you know, insect or termite type of issues. So that's part of why it was, or any sort of weathering, part of why it's been able to sustain for such longevity. The Ndop figures were definitely used as kind of like the votive figures, where they were used as a surrogate for the king in their absence. And again, since these kind of commemorate their life after death, then it's kind of like their spirit is, you know, kind of still with us in his absence. When looking at the contextual image, some of the important things to understand here is that we have Kuba Naim here, who was a ruler, and he's in, you know, his stately dress and costume, and has, you know, all of his royal regalia on. Also working with the rulers, displaying the ruler's headdress. We also see a huge kind of necklace or collar piece here, and that is all leopard teeth. We see that he has a sword in his right hand. He has a large lance in the left hand that's highly decorated. We have the drums, which are very important ceremonially to this culture because it is part of a royal event. And these are specifically the drums of rain. We also here have an African woven basket. He's up here on his pedestal and his throne. It's always very important that there is separation between the throne and the ground. This photo is from 1971, and it is capturing a moment of a royal event. And this royal event is a continuous tradition that honors the Kuba kings. This costume is not like, daily regalia. It's extremely elaborate and lots of layers of fabric that's adorned with different beads, weavings. There's also a bunch of shells as well that are woven into it. And all of those parts coming together, then the costume itself can weigh up to about 185 pounds. And it's so much weight actually that the Kuba King needs assistance sometimes just to move. So the elaborateness of the costuming represents the splendor of his court. It's a status symbol, represents his greatness, also his responsibilities. It also kind of shows off the ruler's wealth and power, and the accumulation of objects are also symbols of that as well. The ruler that wears, this costume is usually also included in his burial as well. So like I said, the Ndop figure is the artwork that, represents the Kuba King. After he is dead, it's basically embodies his spirit. It's not an exact replica, but it is definitely, meant as a shrine figure to represent a past Kuba King. And then the contextual photo, what you need to know about it is this is the Kuba King, and this is, how he looks, and what their special royal regalia and costume is, and some of the important objects that go along with him. We also have here in the bottom of the symbols the ceremonial drum of rain. So that's another one of the connections between the object and then the real life contextual photo is, these objects that are part of kind of that real life connection. So, the sword, the drum, trying to make sure I haven't left anything out. But I think we've covered it all. And then that is going to conclude our African content area. And hopefully you enjoyed learning about some of the fascinating artworks from this vast continent. And also, hopefully you are just as amazed as I am on that, continuation of culture, this long sustaining tradition of culture that I think is absolutely fascinating, and what sets a lot of African art apart from many others.